Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Arkitechs Digitalk. We have Glenn with us today. He's going to talk about sales, and we're going to link all of that to marketing, and we're going to have a really cool discussion about what it means to, and you're going to help me here, Glenn, with your introduction, because you just wrote a book, and the name of the book is super cool. It's Never Sit in the Lobby Again, right?
That's right. Never sit in the lobby. Yeah.
All right. So, and you have some really interesting ideas in the book that we are going to go through during this podcast. Please go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us how you came up with the book, your experience, and a little bit about yourself.
So the book came about based on all my years in selling, and this year I sort of celebrate 40 years in sales. 1985, I got kicked out of the Canadian government. They didn't think I fit in, and my boss told me go get a job in sales. I took him at his word. I thought it was a good idea too, and I went and started working for a sales company. I was only in my early 20s. I'd been with the government right out of college, and so I started learning from other people, other sales guys similar to me, and mentors and coworkers. And over the years, I started taking notes.
Tell us
Go ahead.
The story behind the title of the book and what it
means,
and what it means for sales professionals, right?
Yeah. So the title of the book is one of the chapters, Never Sit in the Lobby, and it's one of the golden rules, and it comes from the early days when I discovered that waiting passively in the lobby, sitting around, in those days, it's like flipping through magazines or, what have you. But over the years, eventually we got to playing with our phones and things like that, right? And I realized that it was a bad look. And when people would come out and you would be distracted, and then they would interrupt you, and it was just not a good look, right? And so I always told people it's better to be standing in the lobby waiting for everybody. And there's another rule that's tied in with it called always have something in your hand and something in your mind. And so when the person walks in, you're ready. You can shake their hand, say hello. And then your other hand, you've got whatever it is. Maybe it's a quotation, maybe it's marketing materials, maybe it's a, free water bottle you're giving away. But always have something in your hand, but also have something in your mind that you immediately want to engage with them on. Not, I just dropped by to see how you're doing, or you always want to have something specific. I noticed this.
Purpose.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And so that's what Never Sit in the Lobby means. And it's how to conduct yourself in the lobby, right? And there's a bunch of other chapters that tell you how to behave.
That's actually very interesting. So in your book, it's filled with unconventional sales wisdom of all your experience. What is the single most important mindset shift a salesperson or entrepreneur needs to succeed today, in your opinion, right? Because, there is a lot of information packed in there, but if you had to pick something, what would it be?
So I'd say that, the biggest shift is moving away from a purely transactional view of sales to one that's a relationship and value driven. And rather than just pushing a product, you need to see every interaction as an opportunity to build trust, value, and rapport with the customer, and that you're there to help them solve a problem. And that includes even when you might not get that particular order, right? Because a lot of times, at least over my 40 years, I had to deal with the customers more than once. These weren't one and done. And so it's not achievable to think I'm going to get every order over 40 years, right? And so It's how do you behave when you win the order? How do you behave when you lose the order? How do you behave when you can't even compete for one reason or another? And so you always want to be a pleasure to do business with and create lasting connections. You want to be persistent, but genuine, and focus on how you can serve their best needs, even when it includes walking away or, and sometimes telling them they're making a mistake by buying the competitor, right? And so, you become a trusted servant to them.
Okay, very good. Okay, so in the many chapters, there is one thing that you emphasize and that I thought was very interesting, and is the power of three, right? Yeah. And here's my question on the power of three. How can marketers and brands use this concept to craft better messaging and increase their audience engagement from the sales point of view, but tying it up with that marketing and the messaging and all the things that we do in our business.
Yeah. Okay. So the power of three is also sometimes talked about as the Goldilocks principle, right?
Okay.
My porridge is too cold, my porridge is too hot, my porridge is just right. The bed was too hard, the bed was too soft, the bed was just right. And, that whole Goldilocks principle is the power of three. And it really is through a fable or whatever, it really demonstrates the power of three. And I mean, it's all about simplicity and memorability. And people naturally remember things in groups of three. And for marketers and brands, that means you should focus on delivering three core messages or benefits in your campaign. And whether you're outlining the key advantages of your product or structuring your content with a clear beginning, middle, and end, or sticking to 3 points that help reduce the information overload. And that clarity makes your message more digestible and more compelling and increasing the chance for your audience to engage. And so let's say you sell loudspeakers or something, to music events. You don't want to say that we have the highest power, the lightest weight, the nicest color, the strongest construction, we're waterproof. It's too much, right? You want to dwindle it down to 3 key points and 3 things in your message, right? In your series, you typically want to have good, better, and best, right? When you start to go branch beyond that, where we have entry level, then good, then better plus, and then best plus, people don't know what to buy, right? And you want to structure the 3 so that people typically buy what you want them to buy. In a lot of cases, when you're structuring a deal, from scratch, you're basically trying to push them into the middle choice, right? And so,
almost always, yes.
Yeah, right? And so that's the whole thesis behind the power of 3. And there's often, there's other ways of deploying it, but that's really the fundamental and the basics of it.
Okay, that's also very good. And it is true in marketing. Like when you see product pages, usually you see the lower end, the higher end, and the highlight is in the middle, which usually goes with the recommended. And those are your three of something, right?
Yes,
so
exactly.
It's very much applicable to us. On to the next thing that I thought was super interesting from your book, which nowadays sounds crazy, and you refer to it as the principle of never fax the facts.
Yeah.
Right. And in an age of automation and AI-driven outreach, which we do a lot of nowadays, how can businesses maintain a human touch in sales and marketing? Because let's be realistic, right? I do marketing, and a lot of what we're doing right now is marketing automations, marketing outreach, whether we're using it in social media or we're using it in the campaigns we're running for email or all of it, right? Because you can pretty much automate a lot of marketing nowadays. So how do you maintain that human touch and make it, but let's be honest, right? Like fax, it's not a thing anymore.
No, but
it's the digital
it's a metaphor,
world, right? Yeah, exactly. So let's clear that up.
Okay.
But how do we put it in the context of AI, automation, digital, email, all that stuff, right?
Yeah. Okay, no problem. That's sort of easy. But I just want to also elaborate, never fax the facts. I know that there's no fax machine anymore, but it's a point, right? And it'll be obvious in a minute. But that's not the full name of the chapter, right? The chapter is actually never fax the facts and never ship the shit. Sorry, you might have to bleep out the shit word. But the reason why is it's because, and what it means is even with all of the fantastic abilities for AI and email automation and all kinds of remote communication and delivery systems in place, nothing beats genuine human interaction, right? And so the idea behind never fax the facts is to avoid relying on impersonal automated communications, mass emails, and generic outreach, but leveraging them along with maintaining that personal touch when and if it's appropriate, right? And use the technology to expand and support your efforts, where in the old days, you had to really, in the really old days, you either mailed them something or went to see them, right? And then, of course, and then you could phone them, and then you could phone them or write them or go and see them. Then you get email, then you got faxes, then, and now you've got so many ways. But the point is that you can't just rely on the one. Like some people think, oh, I can just sit in my chair, I can move to Fiji, and I can run $1 million business. And my point is that I always try to make is imagine that you're dealing with someone who is now worth $100 million. Sorry, go ahead. The video just glitched. So I just wanted to make sure you could still hear me okay.
Yeah, we're good.
Imagine somebody's buying a private jet, and it doesn't matter how they got your name or number, but are you telling me that they want to go for an AI virtual flight on their $50 million jet? And they're going to give you $50 million at the end of your AI presentation? Well, this is what it feels like to go on a jet. Just watch this video, right? No, you're going to be picking them up in a limo, driving them to the airport, wining and dining them, putting them on the plane, flying them somewhere 3 hours away, bringing them back, and experiencing what it's like to own a private jet. Same as someone's buying a boat. Same as someone's buying a new machine for their factory, right?
Yeah, you know what? I kind of understand what you're saying right now, because we do, like I said earlier, we do automations, we do AI in automations for LinkedIn, right? But when I'm talking about it, I always say two things to the people I'm trying to explain it to, and is, yes, you can automate a good chunk of it, right? But you have to take over it eventually. In sooner rather than later, because you can do the quick connection as an automation. You can do the intro as an automation. I mean, that's the hello, how are you? I'm here and you're there, right? But once there is an engagement, that engagement has to be a real person answering a real person. And not for all cases, but if we're talking sales or marketing, there has to be that personal touch, right? At least for the foreseeable future, especially because I don't think an AI can answer as natural and, engage as we do as humans, right? So we are doing all of those things, but in moderation. And I think that's the key point, right? In the never fax the facts, right? In this case, it's kind of the same thing, right? Like you can automate some of it, but once you get to the real conversation, it has to be you. It has to be genuinely coming from you, right? And so I totally understand the point, and that's what we want, right?
Right. And remember, I'm trying to train people to become, and they're sales and marketers, right? So they may use all sorts of automation, but now they have an opportunity to the guy says, okay, can I send your detailed brochure? And he says, let me fax it to you, meaning let me email it to you, right? Because that's easy. He's sitting, he's comfortable. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. He doesn't really want to go anywhere. But when I'm trying to teach you a behavior, never fax the fax, meaning, so if the guy's only 45 minutes away, you can then say, hey, why don't I drop it off on my way home? Right? Instead of just faxing it, just emailing it, obviously, right? And so the point is that the guy who's winning the order most of the time, he's dropping it off, right?
Right.
If you rely on those remote communications for everything, you will not be the top salesperson.
So let me ask you a question on this topic. In a world where we do business remotely, and sometimes in person is not an option, right? Like, I'm sure you're in the same boat. Actually, I know you're in the same boat, but I do business locally, but I also do business with a lot of companies that are outside of North America, right?
Right.
It's not even a matter of it's not feasible to just hop on the plane and go just for a quick meeting, right? I mean, you justify it, and I know way back, that's what you did, but now you think time, cost, it's just not really sometimes an option. So how do you apply this principle in the concept of remote businesses, right?
Yeah. Okay. So the situation, which is very common, then that's where, some people would maybe over rely on email communication, where let's say the guy says, what's the maximum flight range of your jet? You know what I mean? If the guy wanted to buy the jet, right? Like a lot of guys would reply and say, oh, it's 15-hour flight time or whatever, 6,000 miles or something like that. But what I would do is I would use Loom or something like that. And I would reply and I would turn on Loom and I would say, hey, glad you got that question. It's pretty common. The flight time's 6 hours or 6,000 miles, 10 hours, whatever, with 8 people on board. And I would send him a video message, right? And I'd say, and while I'm engaging with them, I say, and, when people ask me about flight times and distances, it often brings up the next question is this and this and this, right? And I mean, to send him all that in an email, he's not going to read it all, right? He's just going to see, 6 hours, and he's going to hit delete, right? But because he just doesn't want to read 4 paragraphs. But on a 30-second Loom message, so you're trying to get in front of them, right? And trying not to fax the facts. But the best you can do is send him a video, right? And make it very, very short, 20 to 30 seconds max, right? And he's quite likely, to watch the 20 seconds worth. But he feels like he's interacted with you. And you can get a lot across in 20 seconds or 30 seconds, right? And so that's where you're splitting the difference and adding the personal touch, building the trust and the rapport that automation and electronic communication alone can't deliver.
So basically, we're talking about, in the context of today's world, it's about humanizing that interaction.
Yeah,
not
as much as possible.
In person, but giving it the human touch, whether it's a video call or a Loom or something that it's making it relatable.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good. So here's the next thing, which I thought was very interesting, is you talk about always ask for the order. That's literally the principle, right? What are some of the biggest mistakes businesses make when trying to convert leads into customers? In this case, asking for the order, right?
Yeah. So there's a lot there, and there's a few ways of looking at it as well. The one thing is that if someone offers you the order, stop talking. You offer no more communication. You know
That's
what I'm saying?
Stop.
Right?
You're done.
Yeah.
Write the order.
You're done. Right? Yeah. And it's
Check mark.
I often refer sometimes, to the young man who gets up the courage to finally ask that lady on a date, right? And he says, will you come to dinner with me? And she says, oh, sure. That would be lovely. How about this weekend? And he's like, well, that was great because I just wanted to tell you about my Star Wars collection. And, maybe we could go and see a science fiction movie. And she's like, wait a minute, I'm actually busy this weekend, right? Because he had the order and he blew it, right? He gave too much information. And so if you get the order you have to shut up, right? It's a harsh word, but that's the rule, right? When you get the PO, stop talking, right? So that's one part of it, right? But the other thing is a lot of times, when you're working on presentations, and I have these different setups for presentations, and at any point in the process, the customer you might see that the customer wants to buy your product, right? And so if that happens, let them do it, right? And I can always tell people that when you've done your presentation correctly, if at the end they don't say, well, how do I buy it? You probably didn't do a good job, right? You shouldn't. So in a way, you don't even have to ask for the order because you've presented it in a light using the Goldilocks principle of good, better, best, small, medium, large, where you're trying to guide them in, and they're like, well, I really think the medium one's the right for me. How much is it, right? And then, the problem is that people then want to keep selling it, right? Because they're afraid to just say, okay, well, let's see if we can get you involved in it, and as we discussed in our earlier conversations, the range is from 15 to 25,000, and the medium unit comes in at 21.9, right? Which is very close to the maximum, but you don't want it in the right because you want to. That's why you use the Goldilocks, right? And so the thing is that if you haven't specifically said, can we move this along, et cetera, how do we take it to the next step? You've failed as a salesperson, right? That's the function of the salesperson, is to ask for the order and close on the order. Watch for the buying signals. They're not always the one doing the presentation. It might be the manager, it might be the creative director, it might be the engineer. And the salesperson's job is to manage the account, right? Make sure the financial buyer's there, make sure the technical buyer's there, make sure the creative buyer's there. And that when he sees that things are going off the rails, he brings it back into focus, right? Because the presenter's all hung up on their PowerPoint or whatever, and they just want to get through their, right? And so, at some point he can say, look, it looks like we've already solved your, key problem. We probably don't even need to go over the added feature because, and so maybe we can move to the next level of discussion. And that's the closing that you're doing, right? Constantly moving it towards a final choice. And it's not like, no. First, I have to tell you all my other great features. And then, you end up finding out that you tell them something that puts them off. Like, Like, oh, and we only use,
it
we
gets
only,
to a point.
yeah, yeah,
Close it.
exactly,
Close your mouth and close the deal, right?
exactly.
It's basically the two things you have to close.
That's right.
Just get it done.
You got it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so here's a mouthful. So we live in a digital world where we're at all-time highs for noise and distractions and you name it. What's your take on the future of prospecting and networking, and how can sales and marketing teams work together more effectively? So we go prospecting, networking, and how do we connect that to marketing teams, sales teams working better?
Yeah. So I guess, like in a world that's filled with digital distractions, for me, the future of prospecting and networking lies in blending the smart technology with a genuine touch, right? So you use data and automation to identify and reach out to the prospects, but then focus on personalizing the approach and the outreach. So the sales and marketing teams, they need to work closely together, and the marketing crafts engaging, authentic content, that resonates with the audience, and sales builds the relationships based on that content. Because sales and marketing have, marketing wants to bring the opportunities towards the business. Sales's job is to close it, right? Otherwise, it would just be sales or marketing. It's not sales or marketing, it's sales and marketing, right? And so they're both very vital to the process. And when the teams collaborate, they can create a seamless journey for the prospects, from initial contact through the conversation, through the presentation, and cutting through that noise with a clear human message, but using all the automation along the way in order to expedite the process and, and deliver good value, but do it in a timely manner.
Yeah. Yeah. And, sales and marketing are so connected, right? They have to work together, right? And putting all that digital stuff on top of it,
right?
It can sometimes make for a recipe for disaster.
Right.
Yes. And I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, but in your experience, what happens when the two teams are not connected and not working well together?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times it's, either the message is not getting through in order to bring the eyeballs on the business, or the sales team's not delivering on the final, they're not carrying the ball, right? Like marketing throws the ball out to the quarterback, out to the receiver in the field, the receiver's catching the ball and then just standing there, or the marketing teams are not throwing enough balls for them to catch, right? And, and I mean, that's just a metaphor, but you have to make sure that your message is resonating in a genuine manner. And, because I find sometimes, like, we all have used AI and stuff, but when you read it out loud, it sounds like AI wrote it, right? In a way.
Yes.
It
like needs one thing, human touch for sure.
Right. Yeah. Like one might think, like, I've automated it all. It's all automatic. Right. And
right.
And I mean, some things it can do really well, but you have to humanize, it on all sides of the equation, right? You can't just automate it completely. It's, the automation is to help you do more in less time, not to replace you doing anything. Right. And so
I agree. Yeah. Like I said earlier, right? Like you can automate a portion of it, but it shouldn't be all of it. Some people might think so, but I think you still need to be involved, right?
Yeah.
Whether it is, you do the outreach with the automation and then you take over the conversation when there is engagement, or if you're writing, any kind of writing, if you're relying on using AI for ideas and maybe get you through writer's block.
Yeah.
But eventually you have to take over and do a little bit of the work and put in some effort, right?
Yes, it's great. Yeah.
So during the while I was reading the book, and in one of those portions, in one of the chapters, you talk about handling the competition. The right way. And in the book, you say, don't hate on your competitor.
Right.
Right. So can you share why respecting competitors can actually help your business? Because I think that's a super important, and we actually encourage it. Like we always say, you can almost like spy on your competitors, right? Because sometimes you can get a lot of intel and tips from what they're doing right? And also learn from what you think they're doing wrong. But I thought it was very clever, when you say, don't hate on your competitors' competition.
Right.
From the sales point of view, because you always hear, I hate that competitor. They always have my number kind of idea, right?
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm always trying to think up and use analogies and metaphors and things to explain it using more everyday situations, right? And a common one, and I mean, not everybody will relate to this because if they're not, but if anyone's ever seen a dynamic between where there's parent, step parent, and children, right? And let's say the mother's the parent and the father's the step parent, and there's a son, right? And he's not cooperating, and the mother's yelling at him and yelling at him. You didn't clean your room. You didn't put the laundry away. You said you cut the grass. You didn't cut the grass. You were home late, you're never living up to your things. And then just driving on the kid, right? And then the stepfather says, Jack, it's right about time you stepped up and got this stuff done, especially that grass. And she's like, look, Jack, he's doing his best. He's doing his best. You know what I mean? Like the moment the stepdad takes a run at the kid, the mother completely changes and she stops admonishing her son and starts making excuses for him to the stepdad, right? It happens all the time in all kinds of human reactions like that, right? So this person's yelling at this one, and when this one starts yelling at the same person, the other person starts defending them. The problem is that if I say, you should buy, the IBM computer. One guy wants to sell the IBM computer. And I say, oh, IBM sucks and whatever. And they're like, well, they've been in business 100 years. They've been in business longer than Hewlett Packard. And that's what you're selling. Like, see how immediately how they go to defend. It's just a human nature reaction. And so it's better to avoid it and say, for instance, if someone says, well, the IBM guy says that his product's the best and then I would say, well, yeah, I mean, IBM's been in business 125 years. Nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. In all those 125 years, it's not like they flawlessly developed technology at every step of the way. And in the last 10 years, Hewlett Packard, Dell have come along with much better advances in processor speed and, whatever, lightweight or long battery life. And, granted, you're never going to get fired for buying IBM, but you're not going to get the best technology. And that's what I'm here to show you is how the difference we've made in the two. And so I'm acknowledging them in a positive way, but I'm also bringing to light some of the detriments and why we're better. Right. But just when you hate on people, it's a bad look. Right. Like nobody's ever I can't remember the saying, but I mean, like, it's like, certain smart people do this, really intelligent people talk about this and dumb people talk about other people. Right. And so when you talk about other people, it doesn't make you look smart. Right. And yeah. And so, and I got along with
human nature, I think.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Right. We've all done it at one point or the other.
Yes, we have. Yes, we have.
That's unfortunately, it's a human flaw.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah.
Very
so
good.
That's my answer to that. Yeah.
Okay. So next one, the power of the mini tours in the office drop-ins.
Right.
And so here, the question is, why do you recommend always asking for a mini tour when visiting a client's office? Which, by the way, does not happen often these days. So let's twist it a little bit and go, if we don't have a chance of a mini tour or visiting the client's office, what's the next best thing that compares, right?
Okay, well, that's a challenging question because the answer, unfortunately, if I can be perfectly honest, is nothing, because the mini tour does something that nothing else can do. And so the whole idea is, remember, you're not sitting in the lobby, right? You're standing in the lobby, waiting, right? You're not on your phone. The person shows up. And then I said, the next thing is have something in your hand and something in your mind, right? And so, and then you say, look, and maybe you're selling them a big piece of equipment for their, for their manufacturing area, right? Maybe it's a new crane or something like that or whatever. It doesn't matter. But the point is they're not going to be using that machine in the lobby. They're going to be using it somewhere in their building, and it might be a new printer. It could be a new tow motor in their warehouse. It could be factory equipment. It could be production equipment, engineering, design equipment, anything, right?
Anything.
The point is that you want to say to the guy, after you've had something in your hand and your mind, say, look, is there any way I could get a little mini tour to see where you're going to be using the equipment? And and so I'll explain why in a second. But then if the guy hums and haws a little bit, say, and the reason it's a mini tour is because it's a tour, but it's mini and it's not wasting all day, right? Just a quick look around. I just want to see. And the point is because when you get there, you're going to see what they've been using up until now, because you might not know. And you might realize that if they're buying like maybe some sort of a crane system, or they might have 9 of your competitors' units there. So what's going to make them change on the 10th unit to your box? But you wouldn't know, and he might not want to tell you who he's using. Like if you say, who are you using? He goes, oh, we use all sorts of people, because he doesn't want to tell you. But if he takes you on a tour, you can see the units lined up. And also you can look on his desk, because the last guy that was in the lobby had something in his hand, and it was a coffee mug. And guess where that coffee mug is right now? It's on his desk. And so how are you going to see whose coffee mug he's holding, whose mouse pad, which pen he's using? Are the employees wearing T-shirts from your competitor, right? You have to get in there to see.
Oh, that's a good one.
You know? And so there's no way you can do that. The only way would be to say, you know, you said, what's the next best thing? The next best thing would be, can you grab your webcam off of your monitor and show me what's on your desk? Right?
And that won't work. That would be a really awkward conversation.
Exactly.
Right? Why?
Right.
Take a picture of your setup. Like, I don't think so.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. So there is no alternative per se, basically. Right.
Yeah. And
so that one's out the window.
Yeah. And that's why you need to get there at least once. For a big sale, you need to get on site at least once so you can see what you're dealing with. And I've even had situations where I've gone on site and I've seen what I'm dealing with, and I've realized that they only want me there to keep the finance guy happy that they've looked at 3 products. They're really going to buy the 10th unit from the guy they bought the 9 other units from. And so what I do is I dial down, I lose early, right? I want to lose as fast as possible, because if I deploy all my resources to show them demos, and, you know, the CFO says, you got to look at this unit, and this unit before I can let you spend money on another unit from that guy, right? And so he brings you in, he wastes your time. You have to ship an engineer to show the product, you know, and all that time is wasted. And you'd be better off to say, you know what, I could schedule the product, but I'm sorry, it's tied up for 8 weeks. And in those 8 weeks, you're showing it to all the other customers that might buy it. And he just moves on and he doesn't ask you back, right? And you saved yourself all those times, right? So
that ties up perfect with my next question, which is overcoming fear in sales. And it's big, right? So you say in the book that freedom begins with a no. Why is saying no so powerful in sales? And how can reps avoid getting trapped into bad deals, which is what you kind of are talking about right now? That's why it ties up really nicely. But I know from experience, getting no's is hard, especially if you get a lot of them.
Yes.
Right? And it's a genuine fear, right? Because it sucks.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's nothing fun about it.
Right. Well, there's a few things. So one, the old school thing is that if it takes 10 no's to get a yes, then once you get to 5 no's, you're halfway to an order, and you should be happy about that, right? You know that you can't get to the 11th or the yes unless you get through 10 no's, right? So getting a no should make you happy, not sad. But I understand what you're saying, and I'm not evading the question. And so, but you know, that's from the old days or whatever. But the thing is like a lot of times people are close to getting orders, and the customers add on requests that make your life difficult, because freedom begins with no, not yes. Because the moment you say yes to something, the work switches back to you. For instance, you know, the guy says, you know, you've met our pricing, you've met this, you've met that and whatever, but we'd really like it in yellow, right? And, you know, and you're like, oh, well, let me go back to the factory and talk to the plant engineers and see if they can rerun our paint station, you know, and do it in yellow. Meanwhile, they've been doing black for 400 years, right? Like it's not going to happen, but you've signed up to all that. Now you got to drive back in the car, call your boss, and he says, oh, he's ready to buy. He's like, well, did you get the order? Well, no, I told him I had to check and see if we could do it in yellow. And he's like, yellow? Are you out of your mind? We can't change the paint. And like, and so he's gone into all that work. Now he has to turn around. He has to drive back. And then he has to say, you know what? I talked to everybody. I did everything I could. And, you know, I can't do it in yellow. And then the guy's like, okay, fine. Well, then I need a discount. I'm going to need a discount, you know? And he's like, okay, well, let me check with my boss. Now he has to drive back to the boss, and the boss, what happened? Oh, well, now I need to get him a discount. There's no discount. We gave him the discount in the beginning, you know, like, and so but if I just had said, no, it's only available in black or in gray, right? We can turn the black down, but those are our only 2 colors. And he's like, okay, well, what about a discount? He said, well, no, we gave you our best price up front. You know, that's our policy. And now and that's over. It's either buy it or don't buy it. Right. And the point is, every time you say yes to these things, you make work for yourself and you move all the responsibility onto your own self, right? And
Right.
yeah, it's like when your buddy asks you, I have this personal thing, right? It's a bit of a joke, but it's true, right? It's more when I was younger, but it was like, hey, I'm moving on the weekend. Can you come and help me move, right? And I always said the same thing. Oh, no, I can't come. I'm not available on the weekend, but I can kick in $50 towards a mover, right? And so I'd rather pay $50 to keep my friendship happy and not have to go and help someone move, right? And but if I say yes, I will help you move, my entire Saturday and maybe Sunday's done, and I'll still probably spend $50 on food or something, right?
Yeah, you're right there.
Yeah. So
one more question, and this one is a little outside of the book and a little bit more about in your experience, right? In your experience, 40 years, right? 40 years working in sales and it was 40, right? What have you found to be the most challenging thing when working with marketing teams?
Well, yeah, I mean, I mean, if you ask me any day,
it's a lovely question.
I'd probably I'd probably give you a different answer every time you ask me that. And but there was one company that I worked for where they had a very broad marketing team, right? And like they had a very strong marketing team with a lot of people in it. It was very established, and the sales team was just the sales team, right? But I mean, the biggest challenge is bridging the gap between the creative strategy and the immediate sales results, right? And marketing's building a brand, nurturing leads, creating content, and the sales team's trying to close deals, right? And so that sometimes can create a disconnect in the priorities, right? And for me, the key is like, well, good conversation and sharing the vision. But like, for instance, they might say, hey, our price needs to be 10.5 and 11.2. Like that's where we fit in the market, right? But I mean, and then you go to them and you're trying to say, look, but we can get an order for 10 units in a landmark, area. We have never sold into this kind of business, but we need to give these guys special pricing. And it's like, we need 9.7K, right? And they're like, no, can't do that. We already decided that it's the unit's worth between 10.5 and 11.2. It's got to be in that range, right? And I mean, and that's just an example, but I mean, where marketing wants to be too rigid with their brand, presentation of the product, and sales needs more adaptability in order to close a deal, right? And it's a blend, right? Sometimes sales needs to be kept in line, right? And sales might come and say, your product, the competition is number one, and their price is $14,999. Right. And they're number one. We're clearly number two or lower, even though we have a way better product. Right. And you're trying to tell me to sell it for $15,000. Can't do that. I got to be below 14.9. And this is where marketing slaps the sales guy and says, no, you're wrong. Right. We need to stay at 15.1. The reason why is it shows that we feel we have a better product. And two, if I price the product for you at 14.8, then the number one brand is just going to go to 14,750, and they're getting all the orders. And so they can easily take a discount on one customer because 95% of the other customers just pay 14,990. They don't discount it to every customer. The one that you go to as the number two brand. And so all I'm doing is racing to the bottom, right? And so this is where marketing has to keep sales in line. And sometimes sales needs to keep marketing in line. And it's about communication, working over the rough patches, and trying to make a win-win partnership. So that's my answer.
Yeah, it's a good answer. It's a valid answer. I'll tell you, in my experience, so one thing that I running a marketing agency, the one thing that actually sometimes it kind of sucks a little bit is that business owners often confuse the job and the role of marketing and the job and the role of sales. In our case, they think because when we talk marketing, they right away associated with we're also responsible for the sale.
Right. Absolutely.
And exactly. But it happens so often, right? Where you say, because my job is to say, we're going to do all of these things and we're going to try and generate you X number of leads, right? But from leads to closing, that's not my responsibility. But it is so often confused that it is all my responsibility, and it isn't. And so that right there, it's like the main sometimes roadblock, right? Where there is no connection because they they right away associate that, the lead generation and the sales go
Right.
to one team, and it is not.
Yeah. Right. And so I talk to salespeople more than marketing people, but so I'm always asking them, what's the difference between sales and marketing? And what I really want to say is learn the difference between sales and marketing and pick which department you want to work in, because you can't work in both. Right. And so maybe at a super high level, you can be VP of sales and marketing, but beyond that, it's all sales or marketing. And it's because marketing is about attracting people with creative messages and building a strong brand, where sales is about connecting with those people and turning their interest into purchases. And so I need the salespeople to be engaged with the customer, closing deals. The marketing is attracting the people. So marketing attracts the people and sales pulls them in and closes them, right? And it's two different things. And the reason is that a lot of salespeople like to sit in their desk and do LinkedIn marketing and not make sales calls. And I'm like, well, I'm already paying Sally to do that. I don't need to pay you for that. So if you want to go to be marketing, go talk to the director of marketing and get a job. I need a salesperson, right? And so, yeah.
Makes sense. All right. So here's the last one. And sales wisdom. If you could give us a piece of advice to us, to a struggling salesperson trying to hit their numbers, right? What would it be?
So when people are trying to hit their numbers, it's biggest thing that's usually in the way is failure to launch, FTL, right? Failure to act, failure to launch, right? They get frozen in activity. They're waiting for their emails to give them a piece of good news or tell them something to do. And they need to take action, right? Because through action, then they can change their state, right? And I mean, what I mean by that is imagine that you're, a famous actor in Broadway. When you're in your dressing room and you're getting dressed, you might be fighting with your spouse, even though they're putting makeup on you. But when you go out to be Jean Valjean, in Les Miserables and you're on stage, right? There's an instant shift that occurs once you become Jean Valjean, right? And so if you can change your state, you can change, if you can change your behavior and your state, you can change your mind and your attitude and whether you're depressed or not, basically. I always tell people, whenever you have a shitty call, pardon that expression, but make another one before you go home. Under no circumstances can you go home on a low. And if you make a sale, on the way home, you still need to make another call. And because you can't list on your laurels like, well, I made a sale. It's 2:00. I'm going home. No,
right.
You got to make a call, right? Go to a coffee shop, dial some customers and say, pull something that, even if it's, hey, we're dropping off water bottles, go to your trunk, pick out whatever the latest freebie is, marketing's giving you for promos and say, hey, I'm in the area. I'm dropping off freebies. Can I drop a water bottle? Oh, I'm really busy. Okay, I'll just drop it off. And then when you get there, the person at the building says, well, is he expecting you? It's like, yeah, I'm dropping something off. He's expecting me. And they call him and he forgot that he told you that he was too busy, and he pops down to get the water bottle and say hi. And then you can say, what are you doing? What are you working on? Oh, we're working on that new lab. Oh, can I get a mini tour? Right? And And now you're in the lab. He wasn't even asking you about, now he's buying new equipment. You weren't called.
Now you do the whole
exactly. Right. Exactly. So, yeah. So that would be my advice in that sense.
Fantastic. Well, Glenn, thank you so much for coming out and joining us in our podcast. This was very insightful and informative, I think. We learned a lot from, as a business owner and, salesperson, kind of. There's a lot of info there to unpack and hopefully learn. Again, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
I'm sure we'll see you again. You'll come and visit us again in the future.
Thanks, Carolina. Thank you.
Take care.